Cool. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So we're going to have a quick look at the brother of Yeshua, James the Righteous. So he was his half-brother, so something to note. He was a righteous Jew, and we'll go in later. There's a bit of a story about him, and every great HaTzaddik rabbi has a story about them, whether it be the Menachem Rebbe or Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, all these places in Poland and Russia. They all have these kind of mystical tales. Well, there's a few in here based on a lot of truth, but just show how his Jewishness and how we have that Hasidic kind of aspect to us. So there are many legends, like I just said, and a lot of them come from early church fathers. So there's this weird trend in history for the early church to say, hey, these guys are really Jewish. Not just Jewish, but they are hardcore. Yet we regard them as saints. I don't understand why, but that's just how it is. It's real contradiction. Anyway, it's a good source of learning for us. He was a Pharisaic or Essene Jew, so he belonged to a Pharisaic type sect or an Essene type sect. So there's a bit of a crossover between the two. So he kind of hung around those circles. He became the leader of the Talmudim after our rabbi ascended to Shemayim, to heaven. He was given the authority to make halakha or law. So he is given this real huge responsibility. You could think of him for us as the head rabbi at the time. You had a problem, you'd go to HaTzaddik and he'd say, look, here's what the Torah says, here's what some of the sages today say, and here's what I say. Or here's what... No, yeah. Yeah, the authority. Yes, he was given that after Yeshua ascended. Which is interesting, because if you look at Hasidic sects as well, it's interrelational passing on of authority. So it would go down to the brother or father to son. And this is, again, no example being thoroughly Jewish. So he could make halakha, and he did make halakha in regards to what Gentiles need to do to start their Jewish journey, etc. We find that. His epistle, interesting enough, contains no links to modern Christianity, and a lot of this surprise, a lot of this I got from yeah, exactly. There was a time in history where some Christians said, what the heck is this? This is Jewish, it can't be in a Christian Bible, and they wanted to have it redacted. They're like, get this rubbish out of here. Yeah. Really interesting. So what I find interesting, a lot of this information I get is from the Jewish Encyclopedia, written by an Orthodox rabbi who uses Christian sources to kind of provide us Messianics with some good, sound knowledge from Christian and Jewish sources to say, hey, this is where we're from. So props goes to these people. He's done us a massive favor. So if we look at the Jewish Encyclopedia, you'll find that his epistle is nothing but Jewish halakha and customs, per se. So he's got some similarities to the life of Yochanan. In fact, I believe he was a disciple of Yochanan at some point. He hung around there and, was trained. Yes. You all right?
For a layman, his English name?
John
the Baptizer.
John the Immerser or Baptizer, yeah.
Yeah. So he led the sect, and he was considered the head Nazarene at the time. He was allowed to enter the most holy of holies to pray. And again, this is a tale about him. So I think I've got it written down here. I'll read you the whole... I don't have my notes, but I have it memorized. So it goes something... You do? Actually, yeah, I will, because it's a really good story. And I'll say the shorter one first, because it's simpler. So there's a story about him in a drought. Some Jews go up to him and say, oh, it's raining. Can you pray for it to rain? And they record his dress manner as that of an Essene priest. So the Essenes had their own kind of priesthood, being this sect of priests who were separate from everyone else. They didn't like the Pharisees, they didn't like the Sadducees. So according to this, it's an early church father, I think it's Eusebius or someone, says that he was like that. He stretched out his hands to heaven and said, rain, and the rain fell immediately. So he was so righteous, he could bring rain to the land. So that's one thing. And then there's this kind of interesting tale about how he was martyred. It kind of has a conflict with some of the not hypocritical Pharisees, you could say. So he's this character that prays in the most holy of holies. He's this really righteous guy. he was said to have been martyred during Passover when Sadducees and Pharisees asked him to stand on the wing of the temple and tell all the people not to believe in Yeshua. This occurred as a result of the Pharisees questioning Yaakov or James on the way of salvation, which he said was Yeshua. They said, which is the gate of salvation? He said, it's Yeshua. And they didn't quite like that. He was said to be a great evangelist in the sense of he made many Talmudim in the name of Yeshua. He brought disciples in, Jewish and non-Jewish, I believe. So upon standing upon the wing of the temple, instead of doing as asked to turn people away and say, no, Yeshua is not, he said this. Why do ye ask me concerning Yeshua, the Son of Man? He sitteth in heaven at the right hand of great power and is about to come upon the clouds of heaven. The crowds responded, note the response of the other Jewish people, Hoshiana to the Son of David. So they were like, yeah, come on, bring the Mashiach. And then these hypocrites weren't so pleased. So this caused the Sadducees and Pharisees to push him off the edge, drop stones on him, and then just to make sure he's fully dead, they just popped him with a club, just to make sure, So interestingly enough, according to early church father Eusebius, Yaakov was a righteous man who from his birth, and this is where his life is familiar to John the Immerser, he lived in the mode of a Nazirite vow, adhering to the Nazirite vow his entire life. Sorry, it goes back to there. I'm kind of going back a little bit. It says he dressed in, so he wouldn't cut his hair, abstain from alcohol, eating meat with blood in it, or eating meat in general. He did not use anointing oil to anoint himself during the course of the vow. He dressed in linen garments and only was allowed to enter what, again, this is the Eusebius, the early church father, called the most holy place to pray. His prayer was one of intercession, asking the Father to forgive the people of their sins. He spent so long interceding in the temple itself that his skin became like that of a camel's. Like he just got calluses from being there, davening to Hashem, forgive the people, bring Mashiach. Yeah, so we've talked like that. So let's look at his ministry a little bit more. So we know he's regarded as the half-brother of Yeshua. And then there's a really interesting, it's not a canon gospel, but it's a gospel of Thomas. And it says this is Yeshua talking about James in regard to his leadership. This is what it says. Yeshua says, we are aware that you would, so the disciples say, we are aware that you will depart from us. Who will be our leader? Yeshua answered, no matter where you come from, it is to trust James, the just, that you shall go, for whose sake heaven and earth have come to exist. It's a common rabbinic idea that the world is held up by a HaTzaddik or a righteous person, and James is considered on par with one of those people who hold the world up in the absence of Yeshua. So I look at his epistle. Yaakov wrote his epistle to Jews who were scattered amongst the Gentiles, so the Jews in Persia, the Jews in the Greek and Roman worlds. The book of James, when studied in the Jewish light, studying Jewish light, the light of his audience, it's really comfortable and really can be easily connected to other Jewish writings of the Second Temple period. It's full of rabbinical literature and thought that was prevalent in the time of Yeshua. Examples of this epistle are noted to be teaching about proper conduct in a synagogue. Notice there's no church conduct, how to conduct 3 slow songs, 2 fast songs, how to do the Eucharist, none of that. It was, this is how you pray the Amnidah service, this is how you read the Torah. It was all Judaism in the Second Temple period. So it talks about not letting the rich people take the seats, being equal, let the poor people come and be honored as much as the rich, something Judaism needs to think about today. Maybe you should read the book of Yaakov a bit. Proper conduct in the synagogue. The epistle has a profoundly Jewish understanding of action-based faith, which Yaakov gives true freedom to the Torah or the law. So if you don't have faith and you practice the Torah, it is a burden to you, because the concept of mitzvot, or commandments, is to bring us in connection to Hashem. If you do it just for its own sake, without any idea of believing, it's just a thing you do because, it loses its life, that you lose that connection to God. So that's where he comes from with that. This idea is also one that is found during the rabbinical literature of the Second Temple period, which comments that one is not saved by mere confession of faith, but confession in combination with works. So it's not just your works, but it's your faith. And I think I've got another quote here. I can remember it. He says, faith without works is like an empty vessel, or a life without body. We think, therefore we are. In Judaism, you do, therefore you are. You have noun verbs. How can you be righteous if you don't act righteous? You're given the name righteous because of what you do. And, that's it, yeah. There's no anonymity between the two. They go together. Yeah. So he clearly understood that concept. Many of the Jewish expressions and sayings found in his epistle are found throughout all Jewish writings. The Talmud, Pirkei Avot, the sayings of the fathers, all these ethical sayings that the rabbis had around the time marry really well with James's concept around ethics and how to behave and all those ideas. So, yeah, I might just pick out one or two quickly, if I can. The power of the tongue, for instance. What have we got? Since by the unbridled tongue all men are apt to sin, the tongue often defiles the whole body and sets on fire the whole wheel of existence. With the mouth which we bless God, the God of the universe, with the mouth with which we bless God, the universal Father, we also curse men made in his image. So these are other comparable writings that similar to his idea. So I won't go on. There's heaps and heaps of them. One last thing I want to mention is there's three. Actually, it's really worth mentioning. There's three really important teachings that are really specific to this sect of the Essenes, almost as if it wasn't his original writing and he kind of just put it in there. After all, it was Judaism, and you can borrow from people who are learned in other ways. So, swearing, oaths, that is, not swear words. The treatment of members of the brotherhood. So the Essenes believed you become a brotherhood. James also talks about brothers and brotherhood. But above all things, my brethren, swear not neither by heaven nor by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yes be yes and your no be no. This is almost an exact quote from what the Essenes believed. They had the same idea in swearing oaths. They had other ideas. Pray for the afflicted and sing psalms with the joyful. If one is sick, the elders of the congregation should come and pray for them. All these ideas are firmly established in the temple scrolls and the recordings left by the Essenes. The true prayer of faith saveth the sick, and of the righteous man availeth much. So if you're righteous and you're living by faith, the acts of Torah, God really views you. I mean, look at Moshe Rabbeinu, like Moses, he had good standing before God because he acted in his faith. So there's just a few kind of links for him to the greater Jewish world.
It's also interesting to note that he's the one that came up with the solution when there was a discussion of how Gentiles should fit into Judaism, and the fact that he came up with, like you said, halacha, like this is what you do first.
Yes.
Then just to be able
There's a document called the Didache, and First Church of Zion have put it together and
republished it.
Republished it. They've given it back its Jewish origins and put into it ideas from the Talmud and other Jewish writings that relate to the Second Temple. And so you've really got this, essentially it's like Judaism 101 for Gentiles. It's like how to stop living like a Greek and live like a disciple of Yeshua. And it's really good. It's unique in one sense because in the Second Temple period you had righteous converts by baptism and circumcision, God-fearers, people who could kind of dwell on the fringes, and then you had the Noahites, people who were kind of just out there, they just did the 10 laws of Noah. But by following this Didache, this writings, you actually went a step further and you became a religious convert, but not a ethnic convert to Judaism. And that's where we are all in the process of becoming today. Yeah, the grafted in concept. You take on certain ritualistic and ethical rulings that enable you to become part of a Jewish congregation. So he played a big hand in writing that advice. So Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Rob.